Alrighty, so you just finished your first map and you're wondering, what do I do now? And the answer to that question is really, it depends. It depends on what you're really mapping for. And this is something that you should really think about at this stage in your mapping, is who am I mapping for, or what am I mapping for? Why am I mapping? Those kind of questions, because even though right now you might think that it's a pointless question to ask, because obviously you're mapping for yourself, sometimes it's not entirely obvious who or what you're mapping for. So if you're going for ranking your maps, then that means you have to go and get feedback from people and have them leave their response on your beatmap thread, and then you have to get beatmap nominators and etc. Or if you're just mapping for players to enjoy your maps, you don't have to do any of that. You just have to spread your maps and try and get your maps to be known. So it's very important, in my opinion, for you to ask that question of yourself and answer it. So in my case, my answer to that question is I'm mapping to rank maps for players to be able to compete on my maps and earn themselves a rank or two out of my maps. Regardless of your goal in mapping, though, you will need feedback from people, and that's necessary so that you'll improve faster. If you just map by yourself and learn everything by yourself, things will go very slowly for you. But if you take in mind feedback of people, they can notice things that are bad about your map that you can't notice yourself because you have a bias towards your own map. But that doesn't mean that you're looking for mods. It means that you're looking for test plays, and you watch those test plays and see what the player does wrong, or you send it to your friends and see what they think. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get mods. You can if you want. Do whatever feels right and do whatever is best for you. But you definitely need to get that feedback in some way. But if you're going for ranking, you definitely need those mods because it's part of the requirements. And the problem that a lot of people have is, let's say person A mods your map, and then you respond to their mod with, denials of what they say and some acceptances and whatever. For that person A, it might be difficult for them to accept you denying that idea because it's such a strong idea. But there's much more to it than just subjectiveness and what this person thinks. And this is where we launch into the objective side of mapping, which is all about how I map. Now, I'm not denying that there is a subjective side to mapping, because of course there is. But there is a ton of stuff that's objective in mapping, and there's a ton of stuff that's subjective. And there is a little bit of intersubjective stuff, but I'll talk about that in other videos. So this objective side of mapping, you might think that it's impossible for it to be completely objective. And by saying that, you'd be right, but you can claim that about literally anything. So it really depends on your basis of your worldview, which we're not debating philosophy here or anything like that. But assuming that your worldview approves reason as a valid way of doing some things, then this brings objectivity into mapping. So why? A human's brain is made so that we identify patterns. We identify order, and it's something that's separate from chaos. So there are these two contrasting concepts, chaos and order. And these two pretty much envelop literally everything in mapping. Even storyboards, hit sounds, combo colors even. So basically everything in mapping is either chaotic or it's order. Now you might think it's subjective which group something is placed into, and that's not true either. For example, if we look at this pattern in my latest map right here, this pattern right here, these first 4 notes are a perfect square, and even with 5, it's still a square because 5 and 1 are in the same place. This is inherently orderly because it's an identifiable pattern that we recognize. However, that's not the only reason that it's orderly. If we fast forward a little bit, we see that there's a second square that I placed right after. Now that there are 2 of them, it's instantly become orderly because it's become normal. It's no longer chaotic because it's not out of place. This square is identical to this one, so now we have a group of squares. And there are 2 more later that we can see right about here. These 2 right here. So through this is very orderly. However, a square normally consists of 4 points, but this pattern consists of 5 points, 2 of which are at the opposite ends of the pattern, but they're in the space, they are in the same place. Along time, they're differently, but in space, they're in the same place. So this is an example of chaos, where even though it's a square, graphically, spatially, it's not technically a square if you just take into account the time. Another example of chaos in my map would be right here. Simply a new combo. A new pattern that is basically a 4 long thing, just a little bit reversed. Or chaos here, where it's scaled up a bit. You might have thought that chaos is inherently bad, but it's not. Chaos is necessary for a good map, just as order is necessary for a good map. Let me demonstrate something to you. Take for example this. This is just a very simple beat I put together and a map on top of it. So just watch through this short section of the map. So, you cannot say that this is chaos, because it's clearly not. This is a completely orderly map. Well, excluding the little storyboard thing, but ignoring the storyboard for now. This is a completely orderly map. There's nothing chaotic about this, other than the numbers changing, but even that is orderly because it goes in a set pattern, where it goes from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and so on. So, this is a perfectly orderly map, but it's terrible, because it's boring. But if you take a look at some beginner maps, this is barely orderly. There are some orderly concepts in here, but a major ton of it is chaotic, and there's almost nothing orderly in the map. So, full chaos is bad, full order is bad. So what's right? The right is a balance of order and a balance of chaos. To get a map ranked, your map must be balanced in these issues, in order and in chaos. But you might argue that there are maps like Hollowing's maps, like this map that she made of Deconstruction Star, that are way too chaotic. But now that I've explained it to you, maybe you see that there is chaos. There is indeed chaos in this map, but there is also indeed structure and order in this map. Structure and order are basically the same thing, though structure is a little bit different, but that'll be for the next video. But for example, Hollowings always uses these same 1-2-1-2 patterns in the exact same location and time in each measure. In case you don't know what a measure is, it's from this white beat, this big white beat, all the way until the next one. So this is one measure. Music theory will be later, and through that you'll be able to see more order, but you can see that patterns are repeated in Hollowing's map. Hollowings also uses chaos to vary her map. So in this last Kai section, everything's completely different from the previous. So in this last Kai section, a lot of the patterns are a lot different from the previous Kais. Like these 1-2s are no longer like this, where they're in a line, but rather in this weird quadrilateral shape. And also these 4 streams. Alright, so enough of that jibber jabber. I hope you enjoyed the video and it helped you out in your mapping. And stay tuned for the next tutorial, which is going to be on structure, which, just to give a little bit of a heads up, is a big can of worms. So that's going to be fun. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye.